So thank you for joining me today, Professor Tankosic, and I'm just going to ask you a few questions. First, so what inspired you to join the archaeological field and study archaeology?
I am not sure because this is something I always wanted to do ever since I was aware of myself. I don't know, I probably picked it up somewhere, but I was always interested in the past and in the way people were back then and how societies were structured, once I understood what society was. So it was a combination of metaphysical factors, I guess, and, a better understanding of what past is and how it relates to present.
Perfect, thank you. And what does your current work at the University of Bergen involve? I think that's where you work, right?
Correct. I am something called the project leader or project manager here. So I'm in charge of administering a project. It's a center of excellence. In fact, this is a scheme that the Norwegian Research Council has for awarding large chunks of money to very successful researchers in their teams. So we have a center of excellence here called the Center for Early Sapiens Behavior that focuses on the development of modern human behavior in anatomically modern humans. So we became anatomically modern at some point, and when was the point that we started behaving like modern humans? And the project is focusing on South Africa, especially three caves in the West Cape region of South Africa. They're from the Middle Stone Age, so about 70 to about 100,000 before present.
That's very interesting. That's very interesting.
Mm.
And I know I recall seeing that I think a few years ago you were working with the Small Cycladic Island Project.
They still do, yeah.
Yeah, so what was your work there and what did your work with SCIP involve?
This is a project I am co-directing with my friends Alex Nodel and Dimitris Athanasoulis from the Greek Ministry of Culture. And the aim of the project is to explore how these islands that are currently marginal, uninhabited, almost all of them, and unused, almost all of them, have played in the past, and how the exploitation of natural resources by the communities living in the Cyclades have changed diachronically. So we have a diachronic survey, which means that we look for any remains of distant or more recent past, because some of these islands were used until fairly recently. And because of the population in the Cyclades were larger, so they needed more arable land, they needed more areas for animal husbandry. In the past, they were used as refuge sites, they were used as pirate strongholds, they were used as settlement locations. So it would be, we thought it would be great to see how this dynamic of island exploitation changes throughout history, the last several thousand years.
And I'm guessing this has taught you a lot about Cycladic, but also Greek culture. What would you
Absolutely.
what would you say is one thing that's like really stood out to you about the Greek or Cycladic culture that you found through your work and research?
I mean, it's a difficult thing to say because, culture is not just one thing. And, I grew up not far from Greece. So mentality wise, Greece was not that big of a change for me. But I don't know. I mean, it's the sense of community, I'd say, especially in the islands, that's much stronger, and the communities are more closely knitted there than they are in the rest of the mainland Greece, for example, or elsewhere, because of these limited resources and the need to rely on one another within the same community, and also, with the downside of also being in some way maybe not standoffish towards outsiders, but also being able to notice the outsiders, because when you inhabit a community that's very closely knit and small, it's easy to spot people that are not from there based on their names, on behavior, on accents and stuff like that.
And the Cyclades are very different than other parts of Greece and of course other parts of the world. Have you done any research or archaeological research in maybe other parts of Greece or in other parts of the world?
Yeah, my other current project is in Evia, in Greece, and then I also worked in northern Greece and in Pieria. I worked in Serbia, I worked in the United States, did archaeology there, and now I'm also working in South Africa.
And wow, that's a lot of places. And I know this next one might be a hard question, but what would you say is your most interesting discovery in all these places, or a few, maybe top 3 or top 5.
Okay, well, yeah, top 3, let's go with that. I mean, now interesting is that, as you know, a subjective category. So for me personally, the site that we're excavating right now in Evia is important because it's almost unique snapshot of of exceptional architectural preservation from the late Neolithic, early Bronze Age period, which is about 4th millennium BC. So that's one of my favorites, probably because it's my current one. Also in the same area, we have excavated early Bronze Age burials in a cave. So this was an amazing excavation with my friend Fanis Mavridis from the Ministry of Culture, that we found early Bronze Age burials that are very uncommon in the area and almost unheard of being found in caves. So that was awesome as well, because it connects you to the actual people that created this culture, made the pottery, built the buildings. And finally, another Cycladic project. Actually, we excavated with the same colleague caves on the island of Iraklia, south of Naxos in Mikhail Cyclades. And we have found, we excavated several caves, but in one of those caves, we have found a meter-thick layer of tephra, volcanic tephra, volcanic ash, essentially from the Santorini eruption, which is one of the best preserved in Greece. And that eruption was very important because it kind of anchors the entire Bronze Age, middle to late Bronze Age transition. And the eruption itself put in motion many processes that have led to cultural change as well. So those are my 3 coolest, I'd say.
Those are very interesting. Yeah, the Santorini volcano is what I'm very familiar with, and not the specific one you're talking about, but just general. So one important thing that I'm trying to focus on is like cultural preservation. So like when in the field, what do you and your team do to ensure that the artifacts that you find are preserved? Because it's obviously very hard. The weather is a factor, and the environment is a factor as well. So what do you do to preserve that?
Well, it depends on the project. For example, in the survey, in the skip, what we do, this is the material that's been on the surface for thousands of years. So the project itself is non-invasive, which means that we do not disturb the ground. We do not, as most of archaeology, the rest of archaeology is, during the survey, you don't destroy anything. You just collect stuff on the surface, and even that we collect a sample. So for future archaeologists, there is still a wealth of material evidence to be found on the surface if they want to go and re-investigate. And that pottery, whatever else we find, it's usually pottery or lithics, obsidian or flint, is then cleaned, rebagged, properly dried, and stored in storage spaces made available or approved by the Greek Ministry of Culture that satisfy certain criteria. This is survey. Excavation is a different ballgame because it's invasive, so you're actually destroying the record while recording it, which is necessary in some cases. And the most important, there are 2 aspects that are important for preservation of cultural heritage there. This is the proper record of everything that you find and remove. And then again, the proper storage and proper analysis that would lead to publications, and it would not be just a pile of pottery, but actual scientific, you would get a scientific result.
And is this procedure, would you say, similar in other countries as well, or in other regions?
Yes and no. These procedures are usually, the scientific procedures are more or less broadly similar. Of course, they're going to vary in details based on the materials, on regions, on historical context, on the preservation status. But scientific techniques are broadly similar. As far as the curation, that means storage and long-term storage of those excavated materials and other data, that is usually a legal framework that's decided on by individual countries. So it can vary more broadly. Some countries have more detailed structure or instructions of how their heritage should be approached and preserved. Especially Greece is one of them, for example, because Greece has a long history of cultural heritage care, and it's an important economic branch. People come there to see archaeology, not only to swim. Other countries have more lax regulations. Other countries, rely on individual researchers. So that aspect can very more broadly.
And as you've obviously seen, and you just commented on, Greece has a lot of like archaeology that is outside, right? Like the Parthenon at the Acropolis is an example.
Yeah.
The Cyclades, there's a lot of marble and stuff like that. So what goes, I don't know if you can comment on this, but what would the process be of preserving something like that that's just out in the open all day, all year long?
Well, there are certain protocols that are in place for this as well. I mean, you have to enlist professional help by curators and conservators and people who know how to preserve this and make it elements proof. The difference is it's a much more demanding and expensive endeavor that usually requires considerable funds. So that's the difference, but it's doable whether by direct intervention on the objects themselves or by the creation of certain, storage or protection edifices like roofs above certain monuments. Some monuments are encased in buildings, awnings and things like that. So, but it's doable. It just, needs money like everything else.
Yeah, for sure. Especially something like the Acropolis, I'd imagine would cost a lot of money to.
Yeah, I mean, Acropolis is now undergoing a process of conservation and partial restoration that is costing tens of millions of euros of EU money. Wow. And it's a process because they're doing it very carefully and very slowly and very deliberately. It's a process that's lasted for several years and it will last several more.
Yeah, wow. And personally to you, how important would you say that cultural preservation is to you, and why, really?
It's very important. I mean, this is what I do essentially. I mean, you preserve culture by studying it as well. It's not just putting it in a storage room or, putting a roof on top of it. It's important because this is a record of who we are. This is sometimes a blueprint of where we're going. And for me personally, it's interesting to know this, but it also, provides, as I said, economic benefit to the local communities. It provides guidelines for future behavior. It provides evidence of what things should be done or shouldn't be done when it comes to environmental exploitation. It's a very complex thing that I don't know even how to describe it. I mean, that's engaging to a person like me.
And as you said, an important part of cultural preservation is studying, right, and being educated on it. Yeah. So on that note, what can the average person do you think, like a Greek person, just in general? It doesn't have to be Greek, anywhere in the world, do to help out their environment, their community. And for example, the example could be a Greek person in living around the Parthenon, for example.
Well, many things. First of all, is this general behavior towards the remains of past culture remains from the past is to not engage in activities that can damage them, report activities of other people that can be damaging to them, educate themselves about the importance of the objects and what they are, because living next to the Parthenon doesn't mean anything if you don't know it's the Parthenon. There now, at the digital age, there have been many digital solutions for people to report damage to cultural heritage, especially in remote areas where it's not easy to reach by the very understaffed and overstretched archaeological service, for example. So, many different things. I mean, care about this because this is the remains of their own ancestors.
Yeah, and also, as you were mentioning before, they help provide economic support as well. So it has to be
exactly.
Care about. Yeah, thank you.
Right.
Thank you so much for taking the time to speak to me. I'll stop.
My pleasure.